Hello, and welcome back to the Pretty Passionate Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ruth, and today we are getting into one of my favorite things to talk about, House of the Dragon. Yes, we are reconvening as a church of George R. Martin of sorts to discuss what happened and my thoughts on another stunning episode of television. This is episode 2 of season 3 of House of the Dragon, and they are just off to an amazing start. So I figured we can get started with just a brief summary of what actually happened post Gullet, right? We're living in a world after the Battle of the Gullet and still catching our breath. Right from the top, in the aftermath of the Battle of the Gullet, we see all of our characters regrouping in some way, just like we are. Baela, there's a really sad scene where she returns to Dragonstone with the body of the late Prince Jacaerys. There's a whole ceremony, and I thought it would be the Silent Sisters taking control of the body, but it's priests, and they are doing a very ceremonial thing, bringing the body into Rhaenyra, and we're treated to an incredibly emotional scene where Rhaenyra learns of Jacaerys' passing. Her immediate response is unbridled rage, and understandably so. She begins by actually speaking to his body as if he were still alive. Jacaerys, what have you done? Alan of Hull and Baela, they meet on the shores near the Battle of the Gullet in search of Corlys Velaryon. Of course, you remember he fell into the waters when he was in the throes of a battle with Lohar. And we also are joined by Adam of Hull, who is on the back of Sea Smoke, circling around in the same area trying to find out if Lord Corlys is alive. And thankfully he is, and he's reunited with his 2 sons. Interestingly, they share a pretty emotional reunion in which Corlys reflects on the fact that technically this was a victory for them, and also the fact that he's lost everything. His entire fleet and his home is now sacked and burned, and how much this victory has cost him. And he turns to them and he tells them that though all of his material wealth has suddenly disappeared, now all he has to give them is his name. And they tearfully receive it. We see that hard exterior that Alan of Hull had toward him this entire time just completely melted. Rhaena finds herself back at the Vale facing Lady Jane Eyre, desperate for refuge in light of what has just happened. We know that a mysterious dragon rider led to Jacaerys' death. We know that Rhaenyra is going to want the head of whoever that person was. And Lady Eyre is less than enthusiastic to receive her as a guest. They settle on a tacit agreement where Lady Eyre pretends she doesn't know Rhaena is there and asks never to see her again. On the road, in and near the Riverlands, Aegon and Laris find themselves, I guess with a bit of luck, in that the chaos from the Battle of the Gullet has spilled out into the lands and unleashed the Triarchy troops in the area, which results in their captors, which is Rhaenyra's army, their captors getting attacked. The wagon is attacked so that I guess they can do some looting. Aegon loses no time using this as an opportunity to escape. Laris falls in line, and it seems they are headed to Rook's Rest. In King's Landing, Aemon takes off for Harrenhal on Vhagar's back, opening the door for Alicent to set her plan in motion. She works tirelessly, using what contacts she has and guessing and putting herself in a lot of peril about who she can trust, resulting in a very near miss sexual assault from Lord Jasper before finally succeeding, thanks in no small part to Maester Orwyle and his spectacular timing. And finally, she succeeds in getting the forces of King's Landing to agree to lay down their arms so that when Rhaenyra arrives, there can be a minimum of bloodshed. She makes a very strong point, and they eventually agree. Then over at Harrenhal, Aemon arrives on Vhagar's back and makes short work of dispatching the entire retinue of Rhaenyra's garrison that was located there. He also encounters Lord Simon Strong, the Castellan of Harrenhal, who you recall he's a very pliable fellow and never puts up a fight when someone comes to take over his castle. He promptly kills him and his son, but before his son is murdered, he manages to land a dagger in Aemon's side. Alice Rivers happens upon the scene and presides over Aemon, recognizing that he's injured before he falls to the floor. From Dragonstone, Daemon, who found a grieving Rhaenyra in her bed, unable to cope with the grief and her loss, He does his part to remind her of the importance of the prophecy, the Song of Ice and Fire, what drove Viserys' actions in every way. And this reminder serves as enough to animate Rhaenyra to understand that the next immediate step she must take is to use this opportunity in this open window to take over King's Landing. So they announce their decision to what's left of her council and heads out with Ulf the White and Hugh the Hammer, as well as Daemon at her side. Upon their arrival, the scene is exactly as Alicent had predicted and promised, and there is minimal bloodshed to enter the city gates. They enter the castle and meet a small amount of resistance, which Daemon, in Daemon form, dispatches easily all on his own. We are reminded of exactly why Aemond is terrified of him, though he won't admit it. Entering the throne room, there is one last stand put up by the King's Guard, and just when it seems that Daemon and Rhaenyra are outnumbered, the City Watch shows up in great force in support of Daemon and Rhaenyra. As we are reminded, Daemon was once the captain of the City Watch, and that strong relationship and amicable relationship with those troops comes in handy as they are here to pledge their loyalty to him and support Rhaenyra's cause. This encourages what's left of the Kingsguard to put down their arms and survive this encounter because it's pointless to die, and allow Rhaenyra to take over completely. It's at this time that Daemon is directed to a hidden chamber somewhere inside the castle where apparently Otto Hightower has been imprisoned by Laris this whole time. We saw glimpses of him, but we never quite knew where he was. Well, he's been inside the Red Keep. He and Lord Jasper, the rapist, are brought forth from their cells before Daemon, and Daemon pressures Rhaenyra to execute Otto Hightower symbolically in place of Aegon Targaryen since he has fled the castle. She is obviously hesitant to do this, but understands that she must in order to take complete control over the kingdom. And we watch her struggle initially with the idea and ultimately carry out the gruesome task, followed by Daemon's quick dispatch of Lord Jasper, and they do that in rather humorous fashion, successfully snuffing out what little remained of resistance inside of King's Landing to Rhaenyra's takeover, at least from the officials in King's Landing. It's at this point that she makes her long walk to the throne and finally sits on the Iron Throne. The weight and cost of her journey is reflected on her face. At this point, Alicent and Helena are dragged through the crowd into the throne room and brought before the throne to account for the fact that they were likely caught trying to escape King's Landing. Alicent beholds the head of her father in the puddle of blood, recognizing immediately what Rhaenyra has done to assume power. And that is all that happens, and it goes to credits. We have to assume that Alicent is having a huge struggle with this response here because although her relationship with her father was fraught, coming upon a scene where your once best friend turned enemy, now ally in trying to make things right, also in the process of doing so, kills your father. And even though you agreed that she could kill your son, you knew that your son was a psychopath and probably Alicent wasn't quite there with her dad. So lots to unpack with this episode. Let's get into it. First of all, we got to give MCE main character energy to my boy, Daemon Targaryen. Okay. What a turnaround he's had. Okay. From last season, where we didn't trust him. We thought he was going to be disloyal to Rhaenyra. We thought he had designs on the throne himself. And there was always this concern in the back of our minds that no matter what he did, it was always like self-serving in some way, that he was just setting this up, marrying Rhaenyra, everything that he did in his trip to Harrenhal, that ultimately he saw a vision for himself on the throne. But once he saw that vision of the Song of Ice and Fire, Daemon became a true believer. And everything he does in this episode, I mean, with fervor and gusto, is to get Rhaenyra on that throne. I don't know if there's a self-serving part of this anymore. I think he has been baptized in the Song of Ice and Fire, and really he understands the mission. He believes that she must sit the throne, and he clears anybody in that castle who stands in her way, and I loved every second of it. Daemon was being as Daemon as possible, walking through unintimidated, clearing the Red Keep, killing people by the dozen, and being unafraid when he was completely surrounded on all sides by the King's Guard. He was ready in that moment to give his life to Rhaenyra's cause, and I loved it. I loved how unified they looked. I loved that she reached back to grasp his hand as she entered the throne room. It was a small gesture, and I'm not forgetting that they are uncle and niece, and therefore their marriage is overall really gross. But for them and the arc of their relationship and the troubles that they have faced, I have to say, it made me happy. It made me happy. It made me cheer. And I guess it was a bright spot in this overall really dark moment of victory. I'm using air quotes because victory at what cost is always the question when you're talking about this amazing bit of scripted television. But yeah, that's my MCE of the week is Daemon MF Targaryen doing his thing. And the way that he ended Lord Jasper, can we have a moment of laughter, not silence, because he was a disgusting person who deserved exactly what he got. But the way that he didn't even let Lord Jasper finish, tell my wife, or whatever his last words were going to be before he died, before he just lopped his head off. He just walked over there and was like, shoot. Got no ceremony. Very Daemon-like. Peak MCE. Peak main character energy. We know he's not the main character of the show, but he's the main character of this episode for me. Of all the things, the very important things that happened in this episode, one thing that stands out to me and continues to be one of the reigning themes of this season is that although Rhaenyra now sits the Iron Throne, her being a woman puts her in an inherently weaker position than if she was a man. Because think about it, a man in this position would be celebrating a tremendous victory. This would be it. This battle, this entry to King's Landing, this conquering and seating on the Iron Throne would be an undisputed victory. And it is for Rhaenyra. But we have to look at her through a different lens. Because she's a woman, her position is weaker. We saw that last episode, even her own council, her own son, do not fear her. And I think that is going to be a problem moving forward. I'm worried that her own people don't fear pissing her off. And that's a huge problem for any ruler. You know, they always ask the question, is it better to be loved or feared? I fear that in the world of George R.R. Martin, it is better for a ruler to be feared. It is a safer position. Sure, someone like Jaime Lannister may come along and, take you out. But it takes a really long time and a lot of disgruntled people for that to actually happen. I mean, look at what a crappy King Aegon was. An absolute crap king. No one tried to take him out. Not really. I mean, his own brother, but as far as the people around him, his council contesting his authority, even his own mother, for the most part, people just kind of accepted even his terrible decisions because he was the king. He got rid of Otto Hightower because Otto disagreed with him. Nobody stopped him. Rhaenyra, however, faces constant opposition, what ifing, and I don't think that's a good idea type of stuff with all of her decisions. And this is like peak misogyny, even for Game of Thrones, which we know is like, kind of medieval times. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. A woman who has achieved what she has achieved should be sitting comfortably on that throne. But we know that the weight of the uncertainty is always with her, and the weight of what it cost her to get to that throne. I saw a lot of chatter online about people saying, man, like she didn't take that throne like a boss. I guess this is a scene that people have been waiting for a long time for her to make that march up the steps. But I think they were so deliberate about how they crafted this scene. Let's go behind the filter a little bit here. She has just lost a son, her heir, the person who is supposed to succeed her from that throne. She's a mother. And I don't care what anyone says. Nobody loves a child like their own mother. I mean, there's some cracked and weird and messed up people out there. So I'm not saying every mother is perfect and always falls into this order. But in a normal situation, when you're talking about a child, a person, no one loves you like your mother. So no one in this world is feeling the loss of Jacaerys more than Rhaenyra. She's barely had time to process her grief before she's had to hop onto Syrax and go and claim King's Landing. She wasn't emotionally ready to do that. She's still mourning. She wasn't emotionally ready to take off the head of her childhood best friend's father, of her father's best friend and lifelong advisor, most trusted companion. She wasn't ready to do that. He's like a really close uncle to her. I mean, I realize what I just said unintentionally. She has uncles that are closer to her, technically speaking. Rhaenyra's got uncles that are closer to her than Otto Hightower. Ugh, Targaryens, am I right? But we know that she saw Otto Hightower as some kind of fatherly figure in her early life, at least. So taking his head off and him bringing up her dad while she's about to do it, the whole scene before she executes him, Daemon kind of sort of ordering her to do it, or at least telling her it must be done in front of this room full of people, some of whom have been freshly released from prison where they were stuck this whole time for supporting her claim and not ditching her when Aegon took power. So these are people who gave up a lot. And you got the City Watch that just technically put themselves in a lot of danger to support you. This is a room full of people who need to see a show of force, a show of power from Rhaenyra. And normally I appreciate her sensibility about not playing her hand as far as violence too quickly, but this is a part where I think she had to do it. And I'm not even blaming Daemon for it. I think she really had to vanquish her enemies, vanquish the naysayers in front of a group of witnesses who can run and tell that to everybody else in King's Landing that Rhaenyra does not play about her throne, okay? And she will take your head if you come here incorrectly. So you better go and bend the knee. That's the word that Daemon, with all of his masculine bravado and, testosterone constantly probably coursing through his veins, would always want to put out. But Rhaenyra is a more thoughtful leader, and it's simultaneously one of her strengths and one of her greatest weaknesses. Remember the scene earlier in the episode where she pointed out how every single person in that room had betrayed her, disobeyed her, disrespected her, from Baela to her Queen's Guard to the council members, and every single one of them, she said, "Have you not betrayed your queen?" I mean, what king would have stood there, said that, and then taken no hits, taken no lives? I'm not criticizing her. I'm not criticizing her. She's in a tough spot. And I think what's fascinating to me about this is a fantasy world where people are riding around on dragonback and taking over kingdoms. And yet the themes, the misogyny, the difficulties that women in leadership face are completely relevant in real life. You know what I mean? George R. R. Martin did not have to go far to pull examples of probably women all over the world, women in positions of leadership, the Margaret Thatchers of the world, women who have found themselves in position of great authority and yet are almost like one arm held behind their back, this dual expectation that they will be staunch, decisive leaders, but also the hypocrisy when they call them ice queens. They call them hard-hearted. They have all these harsh words for strong women in leadership, such as Margaret Thatcher. Was she not the Iron Maiden or the Iron something? I recall there's always that dual-edged sword when it comes to women in leadership, women in positions of prominence, business owners, leaders. They get so much more crap than men is the bottom line. And we're seeing Rhaenyra get so much crap, and it never escapes me, even when I'm celebrating with her, that her position, her gender are an issue that we're going to continue to have to deal with. As a business owner myself, I even can relate to finding yourself having to deal with expectations from employees or customers who expect things of you because you're a woman that they would never expect of a man in the same position. And again, that can be a strength or it can be your greatest weakness in that position of authority. I encountered this in the military, and I encountered this as a chief resident. People want women to be soft and they want their leaders to be hard. So what does that say about what kind of leaders people want? I think it says a lot. I think it says that essentially society doesn't want female leaders in the world of House of the Dragon. And I think that extrapolates to the larger society. I think that just speaks to a larger society issue, a larger misogyny concept that is not just existing in this fantasy world. So Rhaenyra is standing in the middle of this decisive victory. Let's tally it up, shall we? Besides the fact that she's seated on the Iron Throne and she's taken over King's Landing and has complete control over it at this point. She also has the most dragons in this scenario on her side. She has the River Lords with their host and the Starks, who are going to march against the Hightower host and had just finished routing the Lannisters and killing one of the Lannister twins. So they just racked up a huge victory, okay? She had a victory in the Battle of the Gullet despite the horrific cost. Ultimately, the Triarchy's fleet was destroyed. And there is no more maritime threat against her leadership at this point. And I'm not a book reader, so this is not me like hiding a hunch for you. I'm not up on exactly what is going to happen in this story, but I know that it's early enough in the story that we have yet to see how this is truly going to play out. There's too many episodes left for it to be like, oh great, she's won. Now let's pick her curtains, take those green drapes down, and everybody get comfortable, move in. Our new home is the Red Keep. Like, no, we know that's not how this is going to go. And yeah, that decisive victory is feeling a little less decisive in spite of all of those factors. And remember, on Team Green, this is what's crazy about Vhagar. It's still no small thing that Aemon, a formidable fighter himself, has the biggest dragon weapon of them all, Vhagar, at his disposal. He's a scale leveler, even with everything Rhaenyra has on her side, you add Vhagar and it's like, the scales start to tip in a way that you can't deny. You saw how he cleared Harrenhal? Homeboy arrived and there was nothing people could have done, right? And that's just a huge card for the Greens to play. And that's the only reason they were able to take King's Landing so easily, is because Vhagar was gone. Because if Vhagar had been there, we can be certain there would inevitably be at least one, if not more, dragon deaths and the riders with them. So yeah, we have to not forget Vhagar is just a stone's throw away at Harrenhal, and Aemon will learn of what's happening here. So, decisive victory, she's ceding the throne, but as Lord Corlys so eloquently described it, it's a victory at what cost? He says, if this is what victory means, I never want to see victory again. Remember, his entire fleet is at the bottom of the Gullet. He's lost basically all of his men. His experienced, really strong sailing men all gone. And High Point is on fire. They keep showing it to us in the distance, all up in smoke, because Lohar had sent that group to go ahead and sack it to distract Lord Corlys from what he was doing on the sea. The Crown Prince is dead. We don't know where Rhaenyra's other children are at this point. We know they left the Vale, headed to Pentos to safety, but we also know that Rhaena, who was supposed to accompany them, ditched them to go dragon hunting in the Vale. So did they make it there safely? We don't know. And yeah, that wild dragon that Rhaena went to hunting is directly tied to Jacaerys' death. So, I think one of the most difficult things about this show is also one of its strengths. It's hard to root for any one person or any one outcome, because at any given point in the story, no matter what, even though I am Team Black all the way, but no matter what, Targaryens are dying in this story and dragons are dying. And we know there's not an infinite supply of those things in this world. And although obviously there's still probably 1 or 2 more seasons left in this series before the story is concluded, we are already privy to the future history as fans, those of us who watched Game of Thrones, because we know that when we pick up their story in Game of Thrones, Daenerys and her brother are the only Targaryens left in the world. And at least that we know of, right? We later learn about Jon Snow, who, again, he's not full-blooded Targaryen. He is not a result of, 2 Targaryens having incest, separate topic. But anyway, in that world and in the Game of Thrones world, there are no dragons, no living dragons until some eggs hatch, right? And we also see, even in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, in Dunk and Egg's story, which took place long before the events of Game of Thrones, that although there were Targaryens there, they arrived on horseback. I mean, that was a really big thing I noticed, and it was striking to see that Targaryen royalty arriving on horseback with banners with dragons on them. No dragons in sight. So what we are watching right now in House of the Dragon is how these people go from being the only family in the world to own and control nuclear weapons and have complete control over most of the known world, the Seven Kingdoms. They have near godlike status among their subjects. Their dragons are revered or hated, seen as nearly godlike, if not actually godlike, to their subjects. And we go from that to them arriving on horseback at a tourney in Night of the Seven Kingdoms to hiding in exile by the time we get to Game of Thrones. Of course, I'm going to be glued to my TV. This is not me saying I'm not watching this. Let's not get crazy. I'm absolutely riveted by the story. I want to see every single second of it play out. But it's just never lost on me, no matter how much I'm enjoying it, that we are watching such a tragedy unfold. So here's my final diagnosis, guys. This was an incredible episode. Okay. The action was not on the edge of my seat in the way that it was with the Battle of the Gullet. I mean, it's impossible to do back-to-back episodes like that. I think we all needed a bit of a rest. Okay. But it was nonetheless a powerful episode, and one that I would argue we've been waiting for 3 seasons. We have been waiting to see Rhaenyra sit that throne for 3 seasons, and to see what finally happens when they face off and the math is on the black side. She's at a point where she can start taking down those green banners, putting up her black ones and all her curtains and her dragon decor all over the Red Keep. But we know we're only 2 episodes in. The season is far from over. And we also know that Aemon and Aegon Targaryen are both still in play. Aegon is headed to Rook's Rest for a reason. Do you recall? It is because that is where Sunfire is resting and healing. Sunfire was injured and was recovering in the forest last we saw her, but not dead. And she's probably in better shape than Aegon. With this many episodes left, something tells me that Rhaenyra will not warm that seat for much longer. A dire prediction, but I feel this victory will be short-lived, and I really just cannot wait to see what happens next. I will be waiting for Sunday night's episode with bated breath and following up with another podcast episode, sharing my excitement and in-depth analysis, the highs and lows of this wonderful season of television that we're being treated to so far. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts. Please write a 5-star review. For now, share this podcast with a friend who you think might enjoy our discussions. Until next time, bye.